Have you confused logic with the idea of something making immediate sense? 1 Corinthians 13:9 and verse 10 tells us, "For we know in part and we prophesy in part, but when the perfect comes, the partial will be done away with." Some of us have doubted or left the faith because we say it is not logical. But in all actuality, what we mean is that the faith does not make immediate sense to me right now. Our error in thinking that the faith is not logical happens through us holding it to a subpar bar of making immediate sense. The challenge is that the definitions of logic in immediate sense are further from one another than Philadelphia, Pennsylvania is from Philadelphia, Liberia. Logic has never agreed to always make immediate sense. It is held to the standard to make objective, eternal, and ultimate sense. And when we capture that objective, eternal, and ultimate sense, then it will begin to make immediate sense. For one to intellectually pass a judgment on the faith and it not being logical, it must work within the laws of objective logic and not the laws of immediate sense. Passing a judgment on logic versus immediate sense consists of some of the same steps, but they operate in different time periods. Passing a judgment on the immediate sense of the faith is just me considering everything from my starting point until today in my context and other contexts of my choosing. Passing judgment on the logic of faith is me thinking through all the things from my starting point into eternity, starting with my context and then all of humanity's context. Logic is a universal map that leads us to truth, while immediate sense is just our current GPS location in life. We see an example of this in Job's account in Job 38. Job desires to make conclusions about the logic of God's actions and his faith based on the immediate sense and circumstances of his life. God then begins to ask Job questions that have to deal with intellectual and factual knowledge that Job possesses of God-like events and things that have happened in God forming the earth. In order for Job to say that the faith lacks knowledge, what God is saying to him is, then Job, if the faith lacks knowledge and my actions lack knowledge, what I need you to do to me is teach me what I am lacking. And so he begins to ask Job these questions that are built on a godlike knowledge, logic, and truth. Look at me in at Job 38. I'll just read a few verses, but God goes through the whole chapter. Then the Lord answered Job out of the whirlwind and said, "Who is this that darkens counsel by words without knowledge? Now gird up your loins like a man, and I will ask you, and you instruct me." This is a big thing right here. For people who say that faith lacks logic, what they are saying is that God is illogical. And in order for them to pass a judgment that faith lacks logic, they're saying, God, you are illogical, and I found places where you are illogical. And so what God says to Job, who is in this tension, is, well, Job, if you found places where I lack logic, knowledge, or truth, how about you teach me? You teach me. Since you've made a judgment that my faith lacks logic, that the idea of who I am as God lacks logic, Job, I want you to teach me, instruct me. Verse 4, where were you when I laid the foundation of the earth? Tell me if you have any understanding. Who set its measurements, since you know? Or who stretched the line on it? On what were its bases sunk? Or who laid its cornerstone? When the morning stars sang together and all the sons of God shouted for joy? Or who enclosed the sea with doors? When, bursting forth, it went out from the womb? When I made a cloud its garment and thick darkness its swaddling band, and I placed boundaries on it? And I set a bolt indoors, and I said, thus far you shall come, but no farther. And here shall your proud waves stop. Notice what God does here. In order to engage Job in this space in life that he is in, when Job is going to God saying, because of what's happening to me in my immediate context, because of what's going on in my life, God, this faith can't have logic because it's not adding up. Notice that God doesn't take some kind of pie in the sky illustration with Job and start to talk about all these things that we can't see. God says, Job, if I lack logic in the knowledge that you need and you don't believe that what I am giving to you is sufficient, how about you just tell me this? How in the world was this earth created? Because if I lack logic and you can point out where I lack logic, then you must be able to tell me how the sea has a boundaries of water. The water has boundaries. How the clouds wrap the sea and darkness comes. How I built the earth and where the cornerstone was when I started it. Job, if I lack logic and you have this knowledge, you must be able to tell me. But Job can't answer these things, nor do the people who say that faith lacks logic. This is why in this statement of the faith lacking logic, what they do is they always choose not to associate themselves with God after making this statement, rather than challenge the universal knowledge and thought of God intellectually and factually. For the statement that the faith lacks logic to be accurate, you must use logic as your roadmap to develop your conclusion, and your conclusions must arrive at truth. Remember, logic and the truth of faith are not just about our souls and our emotions. They pertain to all universal knowledge and facts made available to us as a collective humanity. If you can do what Job couldn't, which is show intellectual error in all that God has created or acted upon, then you can't call the faith illogical. But what you can say is the faith and certain things about it don't make immediate sense to me right now. But let me ask you this. Is your life worth putting yourself in the tension of immediate sense versus eternal logic until you find truth? Or is your life only worth you making an eternal judgment off of what you know now and disregarding learning more about eternal truth and logic? My friend, with love, I pray that you just don't allow your life to stop because the faith doesn't make immediate sense to you now. But if you say you love yourself, if you say you love your life and you want the best for yourself, and you decide to stop and make an eternal judgment off of what makes immediate sense to you right now, then you saying you love yourself or you love your life just isn't a logical statement, because logic considers all the facts. Logic understands that sometimes it takes time. Logic understands that I don't know everything and can't know everything, so I must seek it out. And in order for me to do that, I can feel like the faith doesn't make immediate sense right now, but let me hold up from making an eternal decision for my soul about what is and what is not true. So, have you confused logic and immediate sense?